Hi, you guys can hear me? Uh, Before I get into the presentation, I'll just give a background. So who am I other than, I'm working for a product now. But fundamentally, I've been working in data for like 25 years or more. I was there when Deutsche Bank and Bankers Trust merged somewhere in 99. I was there when JP Morgan and Chase merged, I think around 2000 something, 2005. And then recently I've seen many mergers and acquisition in banking side. So I work for at least 5 to 10 banks in different places from the data point of view. Now, what is interesting here is most of the people who here are in quality engineering, reliability and all that. I want to ask a question. How many of you are involved in data projects? So roughly 30%, 30-40%? What is happening is the share of data projects as we go is increasing, is going exponentially. And this is a very good case study for everybody, including me, to learn, because this is one project which failed in such a bad way. And that is the bad part. But the good part was there was independent inquiry, the government was involved, the regulatory agencies were involved, IBM was involved. There are a lot of companies who did actually digging and analysis of what happened. And then we are doing a summary of what exactly happened and what we could take lessons for us as a reliability engineering, quality engineering people. I'm going to focus on the data side, the data testing side, but there are other aspects and we'll take that. So if you look at this is the Guardian. TSB lost 1,300 customers. Reputation loss, people are unable to. There is YouTube videos about this thing happening. There's legal risk. Not only the bank was fined, but the CIO was fined personally for the project, for the migration failure. And of course, there is accounted and unaccounted losses of financials. It says 330 million pounds, but it's anywhere from there to like $1 billion. So we take a step back. We see all this news, but we need to step back as a student of engineering and science. What was happened? So the event was the Sabadell was they bought this TSB for $1.7 billion a pound. And if you look at this, it was very simple. TSB had a system which was created by Lloyds Banks, where the customer data was there. And when this bank got acquired by Sabadell, the issue was this was a competing product. Lloyd is a competitor for this new bank. So they said, okay, let's take this data, customer data, and migrate to Proteo system. And they built a new version for Proteo for UK, because that was the UK data that they were going to take inside. It's a simple thing. You take 5.2 million customers, migrate them to a new platform. How difficult it could be? Let's see. So as I said, IBM, EY, and Slaughter and May, they did research on this thing, analysis, and all the things that happened in the back. So there were key points that they point. Unrealistic deadline. And if you look at us, the QA team, how many times it happens is the end date of the project is defined, and then you are asked to work on the back to get to that date. How common is it? Very uncommon. No, it's very common, right? So there were about 1,400 people and I think about 25 agencies involved. There was no communication plan between them. I'm not expert on this, but I'm just giving a summary. So that's not one reason, but there were many reasons. So this is a very interesting point, and this is where the data part comes into picture. Is when you are implementing a data migration project, people ignore the data migration, think about, I'm migrating the application only, and not think about data. On top of that, the problem was they were adding new functionality as they were migrating. So imagine testing against a moving target. How common is that? Very uncommon, right? So they were changing the system and they were expecting the people to test the data. There was 70 third-party vendors in this project, right? Imagine the coordination and the effort that requires in it. And the last point that we're going to focus on, I went through all the documents, the research and all that. There was no reference. See, imagine you are doing data migration project, right? And there is no reference for any data testing, data automation tools that they were incorporating. So what they were expecting, sit with people, 100 people, and compare records manually. What was their plan? Let's look into it. So that's like one of the key issues that you can see. There were many issues, and we're going to focus on the last issue. So, what are the lapses in data migration testing? And again, just to be clear, I'm referring to each point and article that is mentioned. So, I'm not making this up as we speak, and because some of the things that you will see are unbelievable. Okay, so there's a page number 4 on the Slaughter and May report. So they decided this is a big migration, very risky migration. $1 billion was lost, but let's say we're going to do it in one shot. That was one of the decisions they made. So what they did for de-risking, they did small mini migrations with small data size, right? And one day, on a specific date, I don't have the date here, they did the 99.9% of the data they migrated on one single day, right? You did such a small sampling and you did such a big migration. What are the chances of it succeeding? So normally what happens when you want to do a large cutover, what you do is small with the mini cutovers, then you start doing bigger and bigger and bigger until you reach the main event. But they skipped these blue boxes in the middle. They did the tiny migration and they directly went to the big migration event. And now this is a very interesting. Why they did the small? Because everybody understands this, right? Everybody is educated. The reason they were not able to do the big migration test initially for de-risking, because they didn't have any automation tool to test data migration. So they had to rely on sample. And I think Floyd was talking about chaos engineering, right? Where they plug off some of the systems and see what happens. In data migration or data testing, you cannot say I took 5 sample of data and I know what going to happen. You have to flood the system with all the data that you have and see what happens. So there is chaos engineering even in data testing, right? Because you're going to discover use cases as we go, and they didn't do it. So they went from tiny to a main event, and the reason they did that is because they didn't have an automated way of testing such a large volume of data. So they said, oh, let's take sample. I'm smart. I'll figure out all the use cases, all the sample data, and I'll do it. It doesn't work. There's another point. We talked for a small time about this, but basically what we are saying is while they were migrating the data, they were upgrading the software, migrating the data, upgrading the software, testing. I don't know how this whole thing can work. Ideally, what should happen is they should upgrade the software, do the software testing, right? Do the data migration, and then do the data migration testing, right? Instead, what they did all of this thing together. So they didn't have chaos engineering; they had chaos projects there. Like random people doing things. Oh, let me add a feature. Let me add this thing. It's not big issue. Again, you can go and refer to the May and Slaughter on page 4. You'll find this thing. Now, we have big companies. We are all financial firms. None of us are small over here. So one of the key things is we talk about reliability engineering, software reliability engineering. We talk about QA, application testing, and all that. The question is, and this we have to ask: have we identified ourselves that data is also one of the aspects that we need to focus on, right? One of our clients, actually, Fidelity is one of our clients, and one of the reason that was one of our first clients. They identified data as the pillar for the organization, for de-risking and all that. So that means you have to acquire tools and processes and systems to de-risk data aspect. But here, in a data migration project, they don't know who data testing is going to do, okay? So if you look at this, is the third line, if you see, testing of data migration, SABIS and TSB. So there, everybody's responsibility is nobody's responsibility. So this is one of the big problems. So in data migration testing, we need to find out one of the owners who is going to be responsible for data testing. It's in terms of team, in terms of people, in terms of resources, in terms of toolings, all those things. That's on page 95. There's another, and I have to admit this. I came from the data engineering side, not from the QA side. But when we work in QA, we were never classically trained into data testing, right? And there's a key point I want to bring here. When you do data migration, especially, there are two aspects. One is the source data, and then there is the source systems and the target systems. So to do the proper data migration, you need to know the source system, you need to know the target system, you need to know the source data, you need to know the target data models. Then you need to map the data, right? These are the four: table mapping, column mapping, reference data mapping, data transformation mapping. This is what you know. But read the headline here. TSB did not own or control the source platform. Because it was owned by other external agency, they did not give access to the underlying data and the data model, right? How am I supposed to test if I don't know what is expected and what is actual? It's just basic, right? QA is what? What is expected versus what is actual. What is expected is in the source. What is going to be actual is in the target. I don't have access to the source. Okay, good luck with the success, right? Get access to the system. If you don't have access to the models, the data, you don't understand the reference. Like, if you take accounts, for example, an account that is closed might have a different flag there. An account that is pending might have a different flag in a new system or the old system. Account that is suspended might have a different flag. So reference data, you need to understand reference. So I'm not going to go into details, but basically there are rules and education that is required around this thing. Obviously, it was not there, so this is opportunity for us to learn, right? We are a lot of companies, banks are always in this migration and integration and merger going on. Next point, did not fully replicate the production environment. Again, this is going to the point of chaos engineering, right? You take sample data. Why you take sample data? Either you're overconfident or you don't have the tools to test all the data, right? Same thing. So they took the production and put in the post-product, the test area and the pre-production area. The size was very small. So they did not discover a lot of use cases. So in data testing, this is very, very, very important. And I think this is kind of coming in from different perspective, that do not rely on the use cases identified by very smart people. You cannot rely on them. Why? Because you have to apply chaos engineering, because not a lot of the use cases will come from the data itself. You'll discover different items, different values, different flags in the data. So that's very, very important. So not enough data to test environment to cover all the test cases. So you have to not only know, but you have to discover as part of the ongoing testing process. This is very different than, normally we say, I am going to think about, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to discover all the research and document all the use cases or test cases. It doesn't happen with data. You can't. There's always a corner case that you miss. The another interesting point here is about the testing. So again, okay, we did the merger, we spent billions of dollars on this thing, we bought the company, we are in a data migration project, but I am not going to assign time to finish the data testing, right? If inability to complete the testing of data migration, the key factor for the delay. So the data migration event is fixed, because this is also related to the timeline. They did the big bang approach. They didn't plan for the project timeline, and within that, they didn't focus on data testing. They didn't assign any specific time for data testing. So the takeaway for us is, regardless how beautiful the system is, how complicated the system or how simple the system is, you need to have a separate planning for data testing, data migration. It's a data migration project, right? Fundamentally. So you have to have a plan for data testing. Okay, refer to this page, right? Page 178. Don't believe me. When they figured out so you have the new system and the old system, right? So what happens is, you take data from the old system and you move to the new system. And you migrate that and you say, okay, I'm very good at testing and I make sure the data is correct. But what we don't understand is, for some time, both the systems, you have to keep them live and do the same transaction on both sides and see what happens. They didn't do that. And let's look at this. What should be the ideal step? Step one, compare. Like, I have customers here. Do I have customer schema there? If I have employees here, do I have employees there? I have transactions there, transactions there. So, okay, certified. Good. Then what you need to do is you need to migrate the data from the old system to the new system, right? And do reconciliation of the initial load. Because remember, if they both are not because your migration, you're reconciling, if both the systems are not in the same state, it is not going to be, you can't certify it. So the next step is reconcile the initial load. So they probably did this, okay, hopefully. Now let's look at the next one. Now, this is the part they missed. Remember, I'll go back. And so, in the legacy system, I do a $4 transaction, right? In the new system, I do a $4 transactions. If the balances, initial states are the same, if I have $100 in account, what should I get? $104 in both the accounts, right? So, the continuous delta reconciliation, they didn't do it. So, when the initial migration was done, customers were able to use it for some time. But after the people started doing transaction, they went out of sync, and the use cases were not covered. There's a whole detailed document on it, but they didn't do it. And then, of course, once your system is live, you can continuously monitor it. But they skipped the step number 3, means the critical step or delta update step, right? Okay. So now this is again interesting. Page 95. No automated data testing tool. Right? Again, I'm not saying this. I'm a vendor here, okay, but I'm not saying this. Look at this list. Jira to track the issues. HP Quality Center to put the requirements and test cases. Where do you see data test automation or anything? A tool for that? That's not there in the list. This is a screenshot from the document. It's not there. So if you're doing a data testing project or a data migration or a system migration or a merger and you don't have a data testing automation, good luck. Issue here, if you go step by step, right? A data migration project, you have to think from people, processes, and platforms. You can call them tools, right? And again, we have to look into ourselves, right? And I've been guilty of this when I was running the data warehouse projects or data migration projects, right? As I said, I was personally involved in the merger. This is, I think, 2000 for Deutsche Bank, and then Bankers Trust and JP Morgan and Chase, right? And few others. Number one is, do we identify data migration, data testing as a unique area within my project? That's number one. Number two, if I identified, how do I know I have identified? There are people dedicated for data testing. If you are saying my QA team is there for testing, that is not enough. Because they are classically trained in application testing, mobile testing, right? Real time, very complex testing. They are not trained in data testing. So if you have not assigned specific people for data testing, then you have not identified this as your part of your project. It's a big red flag. If you go look at the processes, I'm just going to conclude this, but basically you cannot develop the system and migrate the system and test the system simultaneously. You can't do it. You have to let the system stable, because unstable system, as part of your DevOps unit testing you can do, but not something that you can certify. If you look at a big migration project, there are people who knows like trading platforms or order management system or customer CRM platform and all that. So they are the expert on the application. But are they necessarily expert in the data side of the application, right? What I mean by that is I take a screen where I enter the customers, and I have another screen where I enter the customer values, and I might be expert in that because I'm designing the application, I'm using Java, whatever, complicated technologies over there. But in the back end, the customer, with the customer ID, with the email, the personal email, the contact email, the emergency contact phone number, there might be so many, the customer type, is it a corporate account, is it a private account, it is an individual, it is a dependent account. So there are values within the data itself. The application developer is not necessarily expert on the data side, right? So you want to keep the data testing and the data expertise separate from the development teams, application development team. And the one that I talked earlier is, do you have access to the source and from where the data is coming and where it is going, right? So from the source system to the target system to the old system to the new system, legacy to the new. It's not necessarily happen during merger. It can also happen usual times also. Okay, so if you don't have that, your chances of success are very few. And so you need to, many times, I've been in this kind of project where you have to actually form excellent relationship from the system, which is legacy system, you're going to close and shut down the system. The people who are working there are unhappy. Remember, they are unhappy over there because you are discarding the system. What are the chances they want to cooperate with you? So if you don't have this good human relationship, good future plan for those people, they're not going to cooperate, they're not going to give you access to the data, they will not mislead you, but inaction is also kind of inaction that will fail you if you are doing this kind of projects. Many people confuse application testing with data testing. In application testing, you're doing one transaction, you're monitoring one transaction, right? A few things here and there, but your Selenium or other application testing platform, however good they are, they use AI or whatnot, they can't test millions and billions of records. There is no way they can do it. So you need to acquire some dedicated testing platform for that. And the last point, if nothing else from this conversation we are having here, if you take this point, test all data, not just a sample data. Remember chaos engineering, put in bracket chaos engineering. You will discover a lot of use cases when actually you take all the data and test all the data on another 50% of the corner cases that you are not thought of. Oh, I never thought I will have a reference value like that. You will see emerging from this when you do the volume data or take all the data, each and every record from the system. I don't have additional points and I can keep talking. This is my bread and butter. I make a living out of it. But I'll open it for the questions and let's take it from there.
Yes, we've got time for a couple of questions. There's a microphone that will come to you. There's a gentleman there with a question. Coming just there. Yeah. So if you don't mind waiting for the microphone and telling us who you are, please. Thank you.
Hi Sandesh, my name is Robbie Batty. I work for a company called Reputational Quality. I'm in sales, but I used to be in delivery on the testing side. I manage programs in central government and financial services. I fully take on everything you say, but one of the challenges when you've got a multi-supplier environment is suppliers would go to me and go, we'd like to share the data with you, the schemas, the source, etc., but it's not in the contract. Mm-hmm. So would you not think another key takeaway is before you start these sort of major programs of work is to make sure that all the contracts are aligned so that people can actually, so that when you get to the stage of doing the program, the project, that you can actually have the access that you need really. I've been burnt a few times on that. I don't know if you have any thoughts or that's something you advise people.
You can't get into a migration project without first having complete access to the system and putting in a contract. This is nicely pointed out. There is one interesting point, but related to this, there's always a but with this, is regardless you have a contract or no contract, if you form excellent relationship with your data supplier or the legacy system, that is your guarantee to succeed. I mean it, and I have experienced it personally. Give them respect and you will get a lot of information, even if it is not in the contract. But if it is in the contract, nothing like it, But that's a very key point, contracts and relationship.
Yes. Time for another question?
Yeah.
Floyd here. So if you don't mind just waiting for the mic, Floyd.
Shout if you like.
No, it's okay, because people behind you won't be able to hear.
Just expanding on that point actually. With SaaS products now, it's much harder to get access to schemas.
Yeah.
For a data center, I understand that's achievable to get that information, and you should have got that information. But does SaaS and PaaS present unique challenges for this?
Yeah. It's a challenge, but the system is fundamentally moving from direct data access to APIs. So what you need to, when you're dealing with, so excellent question, excellent point. When you're dealing with SaaS platform, they don't give data models, but they give API models. APIs are nothing but a data model. They are a representation of the like customer API, account API, transaction API. Then you had to ask for reference data APIs. So they also always have some APIs that give reference data. If you miss reference data, it was a big problem. And then the platform should be able to connect to the APIs and pull data from the API and compare and all that. But fundamentally, instead of tables, think about API. Instead of data, you have to think API calls, and data is data, right? So regardless of how you call it. But excellent point, APIs.
Okay,
That's what you have to take it.
One more quick question.
Yeah.
Just a quick one. It's Alan, I'm from Lloyd's Bank Group. I wasn't involved in this project, by the way. I'm curious, I haven't read the document, but was there a clean back-out position, or was that considered as well?
Sorry, I didn't get it.
Was there a clean back-out position? Once they realised something had gone wrong, did they have a clean back-out position?
See, there's a whole political and the whole thing, right? Around once they discovered it, remember the Big Bang? It doesn't matter, right? In hindsight, okay, now I'm sorry I messed up, right? But it doesn't, because you had already gone live. People were locked out of the systems. People not able to do transactions. People were not able. So it was too late. It didn't matter. So they didn't do a lot of action for such a long time, and then when you discover, when you go live with a Big Bang approach, you can't do anything.
I'm sure it's covered in the Slaughter and May report, which I think is still available.
Yeah, it is available.
150 pages or so. So, because the website, I think, was affected for 3 weeks, and they couldn't do anything about it. I think they assumed not, but I'm sure it's in the report. We have to leave it there because we're out of time. I'm sure Sandesh will be available in the coffee break for further discussion.
Sure.
If anybody has further questions.
Yep.
And thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, thank you.